The cold sting of champagne soaked through the silk of my white dress. I was standing in the middle of the grand ballroom at the Art Institute of Chicago. A dripping monument to humiliation. In front of me, my father, David Larson, held the microphone. "This one," he said, his voice booming over the speakers. Always so clumsy. The crowd, hundreds of Chicago's elite, chuckled along with him. My sister Jessica, the golden child, covered her mouth to hide her grin. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just looked my father right in the eye, pushed the wet hair from my face, and smiled. It was a small, private, cold smile. A smile that knew exactly what was coming. They had no idea who I really was. They had no idea what they had just done. Have you ever felt like the invisible one, or the screw-up in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. That smile was 2 hours in the making. 2 hours earlier, I was driving my Audi through downtown Chicago, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The invitation to Jessica's engagement party had been sitting on my counter for a month. A ticking time bomb of obligation. I had debated it all week. My husband, Michael, had called from Zurich that morning. He was closing a massive deal. Something about AI infrastructure. But he always made time to read my mood. "You don't have to go. You know," he'd said, his voice calm and clear over the line. "They've never treated you well. Rati, you don't need to prove anything." Michael, the reclusive founder of Sterling AI, worth an estimated $25 billion. The man my family had never met, whose existence they couldn't even comprehend. We'd been married for 2 years. A life of quiet partnership and security. I kept walled off from my family. Not just for his safety, but for my sanity. He was right. Of course. He was always right. So why was I here? Driving toward the Art Institute. My stomach churning with that old, familiar acid of anticipation and dread. This is what I call the trap of acceptance. It's a poison you drink willingly. In my professional life, I'm an assistant United States attorney. I stand up in federal court, and I prosecute corrupt politicians and organized crime bosses. I don't blink. I build cases. I follow the evidence. And I win. But with them, with my family, I was still that 12-year-old girl, hoping for a pat on the head. That's the trap. It's the whisper that says, maybe this time will be different. It's the belief that if you just show up one more time, achieve one more thing, dress the right way, that this will be the day they finally see you. That the people who have spent a lifetime dismissing you will suddenly wake up and offer the validation you've been starving for. It's a lie. A stupid, persistent, exhausting lie. But I walked right into it anyway. I parked the car, smoothed down my white dress, and walked into the lion's den. I walked into the ballroom, and the scent of money and lilies hit me. It was an obscene display of the Larson family's old money status. My mother, Linda, glided past me, her eyes doing a rapid scan of my appearance. "Rati, you made it," she said, her voice tight. "That hairstyle is practical. Soddol." She didn't wait for a response, already turning to greet a donor for her art museum. Across the room, my sister, Jessica, was glowing. She was the center of everything, accepting congratulations. Her laughter, bright and effortless. She was the golden child. It took me years, and a lot of therapy, to understand what that really meant. In a narcissistic family dynamic, the roles are assigned early. Jessica was the golden child. She existed to be a perfect reflection of my father's success and my mother's social grace. I was the scapegoat. I existed to carry all the family's failures, their insecurities, their shame. It wasn't just casual unkindness. It was a systemic requirement. They needed me to be the failure, so she could be the star. I remember when I was 12. I won the state debate championship. I was so proud. I thought my chest would burst. I waited by the door for them to come. But they never showed up. They missed it. Why? Because it was the same night as Jessica's spring ballet recital. Not her first solo. Just a recital. My trophy sat in my closet, gathering dust. Their applause for her echoed in my head. The usher, holding a list, found my name. Ah. Yes. Miss Larson. You're at table 19. Of course I was. Table 19. Tucked away in the back. Almost behind a marble pillar. Next to the catering entrance. I found my seat among the distant relatives and my cousin Emily. The kind one. On the teacher, they all pitied. Rati, she whispered, giving me a real hug. I'm so glad you came. Your dress is beautiful. Thanks. Em. You look great. An elderly aunt leaned over. Rati. Dear. Are you still working that difficult job, public defender? Isn't it? That was their narrative for me. The public defender. A noble but poor job. It must be so draining. Dealing with those people. And it certainly doesn't pay enough. You'll never find a decent husband that way. I just smiled. I didn't bother correcting her. I didn't tell her I was an assistant United States attorney. I didn't tell her that the people I dealt with were some of the most powerful criminals in the country. And I certainly didn't tell her that 2 years ago, I had married Michael Sterling. I kept that part of my life locked away. Safe. It was the one thing they couldn't criticize. Couldn't diminish. Couldn't touch. I was just Rutty. The clumsy public defender. And for now, that's exactly who I needed them to see. The music softened. My father, David Larson, stepped up to the small stage, tapping the microphone. The room fell into a respectful hush. Thank you all for being here, he started, his voice resonating with the practiced charm of a lifelong real estate mogul. Tonight is a father's dream. My beautiful daughter, Jessica. He beamed at my sister, who looked up at him with pure adoration. Is engaged to a man who finally meets our standards. Ryan Harrison. He gestured to Ryan, who stood beside Jessica. The perfect heir to a political dynasty. Ryan, you're not just marrying Jessica. You're joining a legacy of excellence. There was polite applause. I sipped my water. I knew my name wouldn't be mentioned. It never was. But then, his eyes scanned the room and landed directly on me. At table 19, a spotlight of pity. And, of course, he continued, his tone shifting to one of magnanimous, false sympathy. My other daughter, Rati, is here. She even made it all the way here. Alone. The crowd tittered. It wasn't hostile. Not yet. It was the kind of soft, dismissive chuckle reserved for the family spinster. The odd one out. My cheeks burned. But I kept my expression perfectly neutral. We're always so proud of Rati's independence, my father said, drawing out the word, her dedication to that. A little job of hers. We all just hope one day she'll find her own path. Maybe something a little less tedious. And, of course, a good man to take care of her. More laughter. Louder this time. It was a public execution. Delivered with a smile. I felt my cousin Emily flinch beside me. My father raised his glass. To Jessica and Ryan. After the toast, he stepped off the stage, basking in the congratulations. He was the king of this room. He grabbed a fresh tray of champagne from a passing waiter and made a direct line for my table. My heart didn't pound. It just went cold. I knew this move. This was the intimate follow-up. The close-range attack. He stopped in front of me, his shadow falling over the table. The laughter in his eyes hadn't faded. But really, Rati, he said, his voice low and chiding. You're at your sister's engagement party. The least you could do is try to look happy. And then it happened. He tripped. A theatrical, clumsy stumble. That wasn't clumsy at all. His arm pitched forward, and the entire silver tray, a dozen full glasses of ice-cold champagne, emptied directly onto my chest. A gallon of freezing, sticky liquid soaked me from my shoulders to my waist. My white dress, the one I had chosen so carefully, was instantly transparent, clinging to me. The shock of the cold made me gasp. The entire ballroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My father, still holding the empty tray, stared at me, His microphone, clipped to his lapel, was still live. He leaned in, and his voice, that booming, confident voice, echoed through every speaker in the room. "This one," he said, shaking his head with a performer's sigh. "Always so clumsy." The silence broke. It wasn't a titter this time. It was a roar. The room erupted in full-throated laughter. People were clapping. My mother, across the room, had her hand over her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking with mirth. Jessica was bright red, laughing so hard she had to lean on Ryan for support. I just sat there, drenched, humiliated, and utterly calm. The smile I'd had earlier was gone, replaced by something else. A stillness. The trap had sprung, and I was finally done being the bait. I was just sitting there, dripping, the laughter of the room echoing in my ears. The champagne was cold, but I felt a strange, hot clarity. My cousin Emily rushed over, her face pale with horror, napkins flapping uselessly in her hand. "Rati. Oh my God. Are you?" But she was pushed aside. Someone else moved faster. Ryan Harrison, Jessica's golden fiancé, the heir to the Harrison political machine, was suddenly standing right in front of me. He wasn't looking at my father, who was still grinning. He wasn't looking at my sister, who was trying to get his attention. He was staring at me. Not with pity, not with amusement, with a look of absolute, stunning recognition, as if he'd just seen a ghost. "Jessica. Darling. Just a second," he said, waving my sister off without even looking at her. He crouched down beside my chair, ignoring the puddle I was sitting in. My family, David, Linda, and Jessica, moved in closer, curious about what their prized new asset was doing. Ryan leaned in, and his voice was a low, urgent whisper that only our small group could hear. "May God," he breathed. You're Ratty Larson, aren't you?" I just looked at him. His eyes were wide. The Assistant United States Attorney, the one who just prosecuted Senator Byrne. I didn't move. I didn't speak. "Holy," he whispered, running a hand through his perfect hair. My father has been trying to get a meeting with your boss for a month about that case. He says, you're the most feared federal prosecutor in Chicago." Silence. A small, cold bubble of silence. Right in the middle of the laughing ballroom. My father's smile froze. My mother's hand, which had been covering her smile, dropped. Jessica just looked confused. They didn't know who Senator Byrne was. They didn't understand the complexities of federal prosecution. But they understood one thing perfectly. They understood the look of pure, undiluted fear and respect in Ryan Harrison's eyes. The game had just changed. The laughter in the room started to sound distant, hollow, and I still hadn't said a single word. I didn't even look at Ryan. His words, "feared federal prosecutor," just hung in the air. A small, secondary explosion. My eyes were locked on the main entrance of the ballroom, because I knew. I had checked my watch just before my father started his speech. Michael's flight was scheduled to land an hour ago. He was close, and right on cue. The grand double doors of the ballroom swung open. It wasn't a dramatic entrance. It was silent. Two men in dark, impeccably tailored suits entered first. They weren't waiters. Their eyes scanned the room with a practiced, unsettling efficiency. They wore clear earpieces. My father, David, still frozen from Ryan's words, finally snapped out of it. He saw the new arrivals and puffed up his chest, ready to play the role of host. "Excuse me," he started to say, taking a step toward them. "This is a private." His words died in his throat. A third man walked in between the two guards. The room hadn't just gone quiet. It felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. This man. He wasn't tall, but he had a presence that seemed to fill the entire, massive ballroom. He was wearing a simple, dark Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than my car. But it was understated. He had dark hair, intense eyes, and an expression of utter calm. The reclusive, almost mythical founder of Sterling AI. The man who hadn't been photographed publicly in 3 years. The man worth an estimated $25 billion. Michael Sterling. My husband. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at my mother, whose hand was now gripping a chair back. He didn't glance at Jessica. Or her suddenly star-struck fiancé. His eyes found me. At table 19. Still dripping wet in my ruined white dress. He walked straight toward me. The crowd didn't just step aside, they parted. It was like watching the Red Sea split. He moved with a confidence that didn't need to be loud. He just was. He reached me. His eyes softened as they took in my soaked dress and the champagne drying in my hair. He didn't say anything at first. He just shrugged off his own Tom Ford jacket, the one I knew was his favorite. The one that probably cost more than this entire party, and gently, carefully, wrapped it around my shoulders. I felt the warmth of his body. The dry, expensive wool against my skin. I must have been shaking. Because I only stopped when he pulled me in. He leaned down and brushed the wet hair from my cheek with his thumb. Sorry I'm late. Love, he murmured. His voice, a warm, low rumble, just for me. The flight from Zurich was delayed. Then he kissed me. Not a small, bonita kiss. A real kiss. You are my wife, and I am here kiss. Right in front of my family, and all of Chicago's elite. The entire ballroom seemed to let out a single, collective gasp. I could hear someone drop a glass. I leaned my head against his chest. Finally feeling safe. He kept one arm wrapped tightly around me, holding his jacket in place. Then, he turned. He looked at my father, who was standing there, mouth open, looking like a fish. He looked at my mother, who was white as a sheet. He looked at Jessica, whose face was a mask of utter, horrified disbelief. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Cold, clear, and absolute. I'm Michael Sterling, he said. His eyes locked on my father, Rati's husband. We've been married for 2 years. If the AUSA twist had confused my family, the Michael Sterling reveal shattered them. My mother, Linda. I looked like she was going to be physically ill. My sister Jessica. Her perfect night in ruins. Was the first to find her voice. It was a shriek. No, it's not possible. You're lying, she screamed. Her face blotchy and red. You hired him. You hired all of them to ruin my night. My father, David, just sputtered. His narrative, his entire worldview, had been broken in front of his peers. But you're a public lawyer, he stammered, looking from me to Michael. He's a billionaire. I looked at my father. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No anger. No pain. Just a quiet, cold finality. I was never a public lawyer. Dad, I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the heavy silence of the room. I'm an assistant United States attorney. I never lied to you. I just stopped sharing my life with people who only know how to hurt me. Michael's arm tightened around my waist, his jacket warm on my skin. He looked at my father, and his voice was lethally calm. And just so we are clear, Mr. Larson, Michael said, I watched you publicly humiliate my wife, and then I watched you assault her with that tray of champagne. My security team, by the way, has it all on high-definition video. You will be hearing from my lawyers. That was it. The final blow. My father's face, which had been red with bluster, turned a waxy, pale gray. He was a real estate developer. He understood lawsuits. He understood threats. And he knew, looking at Michael Sterling, that this was not a bluff. I looked at my mother, who was staring at me as if I were a stranger. I looked at Jessica, who was finally, blessedly silent, her mouth open in horror. Congratulations on the engagement. Jessica, I said, I'm leaving now. Michael didn't let go of me. We just turned and walked. His security team, who had been standing by the entrance, moved with us, creating a silent, Protective bubble. We walked straight out of the ballroom, leaving my family standing alone in the wreckage of the narrative they had spent a lifetime building. I didn't speak to my family again that night. It took a full year of therapy. For me, and eventually for them, before a real conversation could even begin. Our relationship isn't perfect. It will never be. But for the first time in my life, it's real. It's built on hard, painful, necessary boundaries. I realized that family isn't always the people you share blood with. It's the people who see you. Michael is my family. My cousin Emily, the teacher who brought me napkins, is my family. My team at the attorney's office, that is my chosen family. Sometimes, the most courageous act of self-love is to stop begging for a seat at their table and to finally get up and build your own. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you for listening.